pledge night at Delta Gamma was infamous for its intensity, but this year we decided to up the ante. As one of the emerging frat leaders, Arthur, was tasked by the seniors with orchestrating a prank that would be talked about for years. The plan was simple, a fake kidnapping to test the mettle of our new pledges. It was meant to be controlled chaos, a scary but safe rite of passage. Only, I had no idea it would turn into a nightmare. The night was cool, and the moon was obscured by clouds, casting an eerie gloom over the abandoned warehouse we had chosen as the stage for our prank. The pledges, blindfolded and disoriented, were led inside one by one, their hands bound loosely in front of them. Their nervous laughter echoed off the walls, mixed with the faint stern voices of us brothers acting as their captors. "Keep it moving, pledges. Tonight you'll prove if you're worthy of Delta Gamma," I shouted, trying to sound menacing. We had staged the warehouse with creepy props, old chains hanging from the ceiling, dim lighting flickering intermittently, and sounds of eerie whispers played from a hidden speaker. It was all theatrics. That is when 5 other seniors entered on bikes, disguised as gang members. They started shouting and pulled out guns, making the few seniors who were there run away. It was all part of the prank to make the pledges feel that our prank had gone wrong and they were in actual trouble. But we didn't know what scared pledges would do. The atmosphere shifted when Carter, one of the seniors, climbed a stack of crates to pretend to be running away from the biker gang. In his zeal, he lost his footing, crashing down with a terrifying thud. The sound of his fall was sickening. As he lay motionless, a pool of blood began to form around his head. Panic set in among the pledges and brothers alike. "Oh my God, he's really hurt," someone yelled. The scene descended into chaos, the lines between our staged fright and real horror blurring rapidly. In the confusion, I noticed one of the pledges, Luca, his blindfold hanging around his neck, eyes wide with terror. He was breathing heavily, his gaze darting around as if looking for an escape. Before I could reassure him it was a prank gone wrong, his survival instincts kicked in. Luca scrambled to his feet, his hands still bound, and stumbled over to where a piece of metal lay among the debris from Carter's fall. He grabbed it, holding it like a weapon. "Stay back," he screamed, his voice cracking with fear. "Luca, calm down, man," I tried to approach him, my hands raised in a calming gesture. But fear had taken hold of him, morphing into something dark and uncontrollable. He lunged forward, swinging the metal with wild energy. The first strike caught Saint, another brother, across the face. Blood sprayed as he fell, his scream cut short by the brutal impact. The sight of blood seemed to drive Luca further into his frenzy, his actions desperate and savage. "Luca, stop." But my shouts were drowned out by the chaos. Every attempt to subdue him was met with violent resistance. Each swing of his makeshift weapon was more frantic than the last, each connecting with a sickening crunch of bone and flesh. The warehouse, once filled with staged horrors, was now a scene of genuine terror. Brothers were down, groaning in pain or worse, unmoving. The pledges, freed from their blindfolds by the commotion, huddled together, watching in horror as Luca, driven by fear and mistaken belief, became the monster we had pretended to be. In that moment, the air filled with a metallic scent of blood and the sound of desperate pleas for sanity. I realized I had to find a way to end this before anyone else got hurt or killed. As Luca swung wildly, his eyes darting with paranoia and his breathing ragged, I ducked behind a column, my mind racing for a solution. The situation had spiraled out of control, our prank turning into a horrific reality. Each cry and thud of metal striking flesh hammered home the direness of the predicament. I knew I had to act fast. "Luca, listen to me." I attempted again, shouting over the chaos, trying to pierce the veil of his terror. "Nobody is trying to hurt you. It's all a setup." But reasoning with him was futile. His terror had morphed into a frenzied survival instinct that saw threats in every shadow and every movement. As I peeked from behind the column, I saw him turn toward me, his expression twisted in confusion and rage. Realizing I was exposed, I quickly retreated, but not before our eyes met, a fleeting moment where I saw not just the fear, but also the betrayal he felt. He probably thought we had truly meant to harm him. In his state, Luca was unpredictable and extremely dangerous. Another brother tried to approach him from behind, hoping to disarm him, but Luca sensed him and reacted with terrifying speed. He swung the piece of metal, connecting with the brother's leg with a crack that echoed through the warehouse. The brother collapsed with a scream, clutching his leg in agony. The air was thick with panic and the sharp tang of blood. It was clear that if we didn't subdue Luca soon, we might not make it out without serious casualties, or worse. I scanned the room for something to use, my gaze settling on a thick rope used as part of the decor. An idea formed, desperate but necessary. I grabbed the rope and motioned to two of my remaining uninjured brothers. With a quick plan whispered between us, we spread out, encircling Luca with care not to draw his attention prematurely. The idea was to restrain him without causing further injury to him or us. Timing was everything. As Luca turned to fend off another imaginary attacker, we moved. I approached from the front, keeping his focus on me, while the others approached from his sides. "Luca, we don't want to hurt you," I said, keeping my tone steady, my hands visible and open. His hesitation gave us the moment we needed. The brothers lunged, catching him off guard. We tackled him to the ground, the impact knocking the metal bar away. He struggled fiercely, screaming incoherently about betrayal and traps. With the rope, we quickly tied his hands, securing him firmly. His screams slowly turned into sobs, the fight draining out of him as the reality of the situation began to dawn on him. Once Luca was secured and no longer a threat, we turned our attention to the injured. The air was a cacophony of groans and urgent voices. I pulled out my phone, the screen cracked but functional, and dialed 911. The call went through, and I hastily explained the situation, my voice shaky with adrenaline and relief. Emergency services arrived quickly, their sirens cutting through the silence that had settled over the warehouse. As paramedics tended to the wounded, police officers took statements. Luca was gently led away, a blanket around his shoulders, his eyes empty of the manic terror but now filled with a dawning regret. Sitting on the back of an ambulance, watching the flurry of activity, the weight of what had happened settled on me. Our prank, meant to be a bonding experience, had turned into a traumatic event that would leave scars on all of us. Guilt gnawed at me as I considered how quickly things had escalated and how badly they could have ended. Welcome to Hell Week. 72 glorious hours of brotherhood bonding and absolutely zero sleep. We're building men here, not sleepy heads. The booming voice of Guy Fieri, the fraternity president, echoed through the dusty basement. We, the 5 newest pledges, sat huddled on the cold concrete floor, eyes burning from exhaustion. 48 hours in, and the exhaustion was a suffocating weight pushing down on my eyelids. First task, Guy Fieri grinned, revealing a row of chipped teeth, stay awake. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. Hallucinations are part of the experience. Just remember, anything you see, anything you hear, it's all in your head. A nervous chuckle rippled through the group. Easy for him to say, he wasn't the one seeing the shadows dance in the flickering light bulb or swearing the cobweb-draped corners seemed to writhe and shift. The hours bled into each other. We were fueled by stale coffee, stale pizza, and a relentless barrage of demeaning tasks, push-ups until our arms felt like jelly, memorizing fraternity history recited backward while holding gallons of milk, running laps in the dead of night chased by flickering flashlights wielded by unseen figures. The hallucinations intensified. I kept catching glimpses of a hooded figure lurking in the periphery, only for it to vanish when I blinked. Abigail, one of the pledges, swore she could hear whispers coming from the air vents, a chilling symphony of voices speaking in a language she didn't understand. The paranoia crept in. Was Guy Fieri right? Was this all just sleep deprivation messing with our heads, or were the brothers playing some elaborate mind game, twisting reality to their twisted amusement? One night, during a particularly grueling scavenger hunt, I stumbled upon a hidden room. Inside, a single light bulb illuminated a dusty altar adorned with fraternity paraphernalia. But perched on top was a small taxidermy owl with piercing black eyes that seemed to lock its gaze on me. Panic clawed at my throat. This wasn't a hallucination. The owl wasn't there before. Had the brothers put it there, a sick joke to further unhinge us? Suddenly, a hand clamped over my mouth. It was Abigail, her eyes wide with terror. She hissed, "Don't let them know you saw it. They'll think you're weak." By the 71st hour, we were a broken mess. Sleep deprivation had stripped away our bravado, leaving behind raw fear and suspicion. The basement echoed with accusations and frantic denials. "You saw it too, right?" Bear, normally the stoic one, accused me, his voice cracking. "The owl, they're messing with us, messing with our minds." No one replied. Trust had eroded, replaced by the desperate need for sleep. Suddenly, the basement door flew open, blinding light flooding the room. We flinched, expecting more hazing, more mind games. Instead, we saw paramedics and concerned faces. Apparently, someone had called in an anonymous tip about a disturbing ritual at the fraternity house. Relief washed over me, then morphed into chilling confusion. The owl, the whispers, were they figments of our collective imagination, or was there a darker secret at play? We were released after a stern lecture about hazing and mandatory psych evaluations. In the aftermath, Abigail and I hesitantly compared notes. Neither could explain the owl, but the details of the whispers, a language we didn't understand, a chillingly familiar melody, were identical. Weeks later, I received a package. Inside was a small tarnished silver locket. Opening it revealed a faded photograph of a group of men in fraternity attire, their faces obscured by shadows except for their eyes. And in the center, perched on an outstretched hand, was a taxidermied owl with piercing black eyes. Beneath the photo, a single inscription, "We see all. We never forget." It's been months since the incident. I still have nightmares about the basement, the whispers, and the accusing stare of the owl. I haven't spoken to Abigail or any of the other pledges, but sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear a faint melody echoing in the air, a chilling reminder that some things are best left unseen, unheard, and most definitely undreamed. Our tale takes us to the outskirts of a sleepy college town, where an abandoned house stood shrouded in darkness. This house, once a grand estate, had long been forgotten, its windows shattered and its walls covered in ivy. The locals whispered tales of its haunted past, but few dared to venture near. The fraternity known as the Guardians chose this house for their final pledge challenge. It was a tradition that had been passed down for generations, a test of courage and resilience. The pledges were tasked with spending a night alone in the abandoned house, each one having to confront their deepest fears within its decaying walls. Among them was Drake, a quiet, introspective student. He had always been more comfortable with books than with people, and this challenge was his way of proving himself. As the sun set, the pledges were driven to the house. The journey was filled with nervous laughter and whispered reassurances, but as they approached the house, a heavy silence fell over them. The air grew heavy with dread as they stepped out of the van. The house loomed before them, its dark silhouette a stark contrast against the twilight sky. Drake found himself standing before a door hanging precariously from its hinges. The wood was splintered and rotting, and the doorknob was cold and unyielding. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under his weight, and the air was thick with the smell of decay and mildew. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the ceiling sagged ominously. The floorboards groaned beneath his feet, each step echoing through the empty halls, a reminder of the house's long abandonment. He shone his flashlight around, taking in the dilapidated state of the house. The beam of light revealed broken furniture, shattered glass, and layers of dust that had settled over the years. Cobwebs hung from every corner, and broken furniture lay scattered across the floor. It was as if time had stood still within these walls. As darkness descended, the silence was broken by unsettling noises. The wind howled through the broken windows, and the house seemed to groan and sigh. Drake tried to convince himself it was just the house settling. He repeated this mantra in his mind, trying to quell the rising tide of fear. But deep down, he felt he was being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and he couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes following his every move. He spent what felt like an eternity huddled in a corner, the minutes stretching into hours, and the oppressive silence weighed heavily on him. Then he heard a soft whisper coming from the floor above. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it sent a chill down his spine. Curiosity won over fear, and he made his way towards the staircase. Each step was a battle against the urge to turn and run. As he reached the top, the whispering grew louder. It was a low, murmuring sound, like a conversation just out of earshot. It seemed to be coming from a room at the end of the hallway. The door was slightly ajar, and a sliver of light spilled out into the dark corridor. He approached cautiously and pushed the door open. The hinges squealed in protest, and the door swung open to reveal an empty room. The room was empty, but the whispering had stopped. The silence was deafening, and Drake's heart pounded in his chest. Drake noticed something strange about the far wall. There were markings, faint and almost hidden beneath layers of grime. It looked as if someone had tried to conceal something. The markings formed a pattern, a series of symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. He approached the wall and knocked on it. It sounded hollow. His curiosity piqued. He began to tear away at the flimsy wall, revealing a small, dark space. Inside was a small wooden box covered in strange symbols. The box was unlocked. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the lid. After a moment, he opened it. The lid creaked open, revealing a single sheet of yellowed parchment. The paper was brittle and ancient, the ink seemed to shimmer in the dim light. As he read, the words seemed to shift and change before his eyes. They spoke of an ancient evil bound to the house, a curse that had claimed countless lives. The words were a warning, a plea for anyone who found the parchment to leave and never return. Drake felt a cold dread creep up his spine. The air seemed to grow colder, and he could feel the weight of the house's dark history pressing down on him. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and died. The darkness closed in around him, and he was plunged into a world of shadows. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the house, a sound of pure terror that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Drake dropped the parchment and stumbled back, his heart racing and his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He heard the doorknob rattle, and the door swung open. He braced himself for the worst, but it was one of the other pledges. Relief washed over Drake. They exchanged a look of mutual understanding, both shaken by their experiences. They left the room, but the experience had changed them. The house had revealed its secrets, and they would carry the memory of that night with them forever. The abandoned house remained a testament to the darkness that lay hidden beneath the surface of the world. It stood as a reminder of the unseen forces that lurk in the shadows, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to seek them out. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to watch the latest videos.